Jerusalem, the holy city, is captured by the Romans and the first temple is destroyed. How did it happen? The year is 66 AD. After years of unrest, the Jews rebel against the rule of Rome. In response, the Roman Empire sends an army to put down the rebellion. This force numbers between 40 and 80,000 men under the command of the experienced general Vespasian. The Jewish forces are led by a man named Eleazar ben Jair. He's called the son of Simon bar Kokheba. We know very little about him, but we do know that he was a skilled warrior. Despite being outnumbered, he managed to harass the Roman forces so much that Vespasian had to abandon his siege and retreat. Vespia's son, Titus, was sent back with orders to finish the job. And this time, nothing would stop them. They laid siege to the city once more. But this time they were prepared. They built siege towers to enable their soldiers to literally walk into the city. And they even built a road from the camp to the city to bring in supplies. Slowly but surely, the Roman army closed in on the city of Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the Jewish leaders were arguing amongst themselves on how to proceed. Some wanted to negotiate peace with the Romans, while others, such as John of Giscala, wanted to continue the fight. Eventually, they decided to keep fighting, and so the Romans continued their assault. After 4 years of fighting, the city walls were broken through, and the Romans entered Jerusalem, pillaging the city and massacring the Jews. The Romans allowed everyone to leave the city except for the fighters, who they took back to Rome as slaves. It is estimated that between 1 and 2 million people died during this war. But what happened to the temple? You see, it wasn't just any building that the Romans burned down. It was the holiest building in the history of Judaism. So how did this happen? As mentioned before, when Vespia saw that he couldn't make progress against the Jews, he decided to retreat and return home to Rome. There he wrote to the Senate and told them that he needed more soldiers to finish the job. In response, the Senate sent him his son Titus to replace him. Titus arrived in Judea with 40,000 troops. These men were veterans. They had fought in many wars for the Roman Empire and knew what it was like to be in battle. So they were more than capable of dealing with these Jewish rebels. However, there was one problem. Vespasian had already spent 2 years trying to capture Jerusalem and hadn't gotten anywhere. So Titus had to come up with another plan. He built siege towers. These towers were massive structures made out of wood and stone. They were so tall that they reached the top of Jerusalem's city walls. On top of these towers, the Romans placed archers and catapults. Every day, these archers would shoot arrows into the city, and the catapults would fling stones over the wall. This kept the Jews inside the city too afraid to come out. Not only did this weaken the Jewish forces, but it also gave the Romans the upper hand. Slowly but surely, the Jews inside the city grew weaker. Their food supplies began to dwindle, and the constant attacks from the Roman army took their toll. After a few months of this, the Romans attacked again, this time with full force. They charged into the city and fought their way to the western wall. They expected resistance here, but surprisingly, none came. The Jewish army was gone. Titus and his men entered the city and found it deserted. As they walked through the streets, they saw bodies everywhere. Some had been killed in battle, while others had starved to death. It was a terrible sight, but Titus had no time to waste. He had come to Jerusalem to conquer it, and that is exactly what he did. He marched his troops to the Temple Mount and ordered them to burn down the temple. As the flames spread throughout the complex, Titus stood watching with a mixture of excitement and sadness. The Jewish war had finally come to an end, but the cost had been high. Now that the temple was destroyed, there was nothing left for the Jews in Jerusalem. Soon, Titus and his men began to pillage the city. They took everything they could find, including gold, silver, and precious gems. They also took food, clothing, and other supplies. Nothing was spared. The Jews who had survived the war were now slaves to the Romans. Many of them were taken to Rome, where they were paraded through the streets as spoils of war. Others were sold into slavery throughout the empire. And so it was that the once great city of Jerusalem was captured by the Romans, and the first temple was destroyed. But why did the Jews lose? Why couldn't they win against the Roman Empire? The answer, in my opinion, is simple. The Jewish people were never united. Even when faced with the might of the Roman Empire, they could not put aside their differences. There were many factions within the Jewish people, each with their own agenda. This made it impossible for them to mount a serious defense against the Romans. Had they been united, things may have turned out differently. But as it was, they were doomed to fail. So what can we learn from this story? What does it mean for us today? I believe that there are two lessons we can take away from it. The first is that we should never underestimate our enemies. No matter how powerful they are, as long as we are united, we can overcome any obstacle. Secondly, we must remember that God is in control. Even when things look darkest, we can trust that He has a plan for us. Let us never forget the lessons of the past so that we can be better prepared for the future. The fall of Jerusalem was a tragic event, but it doesn't have to be the end of the story. In fact, I believe that it is only the beginning. The Jewish people were able to rebuild their lives after the destruction of the temple. They created the oral Torah to help guide them through difficult times. And they eventually rebuilt the temple as well. But it was different now. It was built with the foundation of faith and hope. The same is true for us today. No matter how difficult things may seem, we must never give up. We must hold fast to our faith and hope for a brighter future. The fall of Jerusalem may have been a devastating event, but it doesn't have to be the end of our story. If you enjoyed this video, then check out my channel where I talk about all things history. Thanks for watching.